Billy Crystal's on there and he's going, come on, come on, come on. Funny as money. I was pretty much done. I was pretty burned out. And Rich said, you have to pick up that Oculus Quest.
That's very Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, it is. Right. Yeah. Let you do the Dungeon Master lets you do what you want. Right. And they said, we want to go ahead and put this on the NES. And we said, well, you can't. I mean, really, it's, there's not enough pixels. The first online game I played was in the library on a dial-up. It was a game called Kingdom. I mean, my whole goal with Shadowgate was to make it the most immersive fantasy game ever. Oh, fantastic. Just another web-filled cavern that goes into nothing. What could possibly go wrong with that and stuff? And Gygax would even be there now and then running a campaign or talking to players. It ended up becoming the first-person fantasy game ever.
Welcome, everyone, to another edition of The Save State. I'm here today with Dave Marsh. And Dave, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks. I have a bit of a cold, so I'll just hang in with me there.
Well, yeah, just try not to sneeze on me. I don't want to catch anything from you.
Fair enough.
Dave Marsh is the co-creator of a franchise that I've liked for many, many years. It's called Shadowgate, and today we're going to talk to Dave about his journey in the video game industry and his game Shadowgate VR mostly, but maybe a little bit about the franchise as a whole.
Yeah, sounds great.
So Dave, this morning I want to start by just getting to know you a little bit and kind of your journey toward being a game developer. How did all that happen? Who is Dave Marsh?
Yeah, so I was born outside of Chicago. I was born in Chicago and lived outside of Chicago until I was 33 and moved to Virginia. I was always very interested in comics and fantasy, Lord of the Rings, everything. And so when Dungeons and Dragons came out in the, mid-late 70s, we weren't that far from Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, where Gygax created it. And so my mom would drive me and my friend over there, and they had a shop called The Dungeon that sold lead miniatures and monster manuals and player handbook and things like that and stuff. And Gygax would even be there now and then running a campaign or talking to players. And so, just loved fantasy. Thought it was, fantastic and stuff. So I really, I would say my early days kind of just go back to, my influences. My parents, very, very supportive of anything creative that I was doing. The first computer I ever got, I think, was a TSR-80 or something from Radio Shack that had, a little paint program on it that you could select like 4 colors and use a joystick to create robots or whatever. That's what I did. So I got into, graphics pretty early, even in a fundamental, like a rudimentary state. So, but no, those were always my interests. And I still, to this day have, interest in that. But it's really my folks that were just always super supportive of everything I wanted to do. And, liking the things that were uncool then that are apparently cool now. So
I think that makes a huge difference, right? Just having parents that are supportive like that. That's really cool.
Yeah. And just, from everything from, comics to D&D to, the first online game I played was in the library on a dial-up. It was a game called Kingdom, and it was just text-based, and you'd press 1 to fight, press 2 to run, and monsters would randomly attack you and hit you for this many points. So they're all related, obviously, but a lot of different things. Getting a computer early, playing an online game to get me excited about gaming, playing D&D and being far, not far from it, collecting comics. Yeah.
Do you have some favorite comic characters?
Yeah, so I still actually collect them, but mostly Thor and the Avengers, Captain America, guys like that. But I still have probably too many comics I should have from the 60s and 70s and stuff, which is pretty much kind of what I dig and everything. So yeah, and so like I was just mentioning to you before this, I just finally I asked for a 3D printer for for my birthday, and the first thing I tried was a miniature paladin, to see how that would work out and stuff. So it's it's a hard habit to break, I guess. So
Yeah, well, you definitely see some Thor, some Norse influence in Shadowgate VR, which is fun that you mentioned that.
right.
So you grew up with the comics and the Dungeons and Dragons and or, your computer. At what point? How did the idea for Shadowgate come about? Like, just yeah, walk me through that. Like, how did that work? Because
Right.
it's a brilliant game and really
Well,
took it.
it's something. Well, I mean, the thing is, you look back and it was, that was 1985 when I started working on it, right? So it's 40
Mhm.
years. So I had all this, influence of fantasy and stuff. And I was working in a youth group in a mega church in Chicago, youth ministries. And, at the same time, I was working in a print room, printing junk mail. That was my job, right? There was a guy that joined the ministry who was a programmer at a company called ICOM Simulations.
Mm.
And he was saying now that they had created this, using on the Mac, how they were using the Windows features to go ahead and create a Windows-based adventure game, which is a game called Deja Vu: A Nightmare Comes True. They were also working on a haunted house game called The Uninvited, and he was relatively new there. His name is Terry Schulenberg, and Terry was relatively new, and we were talking about it, and I was saying, well, it asked me if I'd ever, done anything on a Mac or anything, and of course I didn't have one, and but I had done some stuff on the TRS-80, and I showed it to him and stuff, and he said, well, if I get you a Mac, would you be interested in doing some art and seeing how it goes? And so I said, sure. I thought that was great. So this is 1985. And so I called my best friend, Karl Roelofs, and said, do you want to help me design this? And the only thing looking at this, I think we could make a fantasy game, right? And so Shadowgate ended up becoming the first person fantasy game ever. And
Wow, I
so
didn't
we
know
did.
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not the first person game, but it's
Yeah.
the first fantasy one. So we were just designing it and we didn't know what we were doing. The one thing I liked about playing D&D was that with our dungeon master, a guy named Dave Wolf, with Dave, we would every room would be different. And so
Hmm.
that's why when you play Shadowgate, you have one room that's a lake room and the next room has lava. I mean, it makes zero sense. But I always liked the fact that I never knew what was going to be in the next room. It wasn't just a
Yeah.
dungeon crawl where I'm like, okay, this looks exactly like the last room.
I think that's one of the things that made it so special. I mean,
Yeah.
I never thought about the fact that it was first person really, but yes, that it was so different than everything else. Well, I played it on the NES.
Right. Yeah.
So it was so different from anything else on the NES, and each room was so different from the last. You didn't know what to expect when you went through that next doorway. You didn't know what was going to be in there, and that
No,
was
no, that was
part
the
of
thing.
what was so great about it.
Well, the problem, I mean, looking back on it, when we redid it in 2014, we jettisoned. I mean, we kept the rooms, but we jettisoned the puzzles that were too obtuse. And that was the thing. We didn't really know. It's like, well, which mirror should I break? I mean, we never gave you any hints about it or anything, so we didn't really know what we were doing for the most part. But I eventually got hired at ICOM, and so did Karl, and in between finishing Shadowgate, I was doing work on The Uninvited as an artist, and Deja Vu was doing well, back in selling in Egghead software stores and whatever. And then we were porting. We took it from the Mac to the Atari ST to the Commodore Amiga, on the PC with different, color modes, CGA, VGA, EGA,
Yeah.
bringing it, every platform we could while we continue to make games. And so that's when we were approached by Chemco, which I still have a relationship with. I still talk to those guys. And they said, we want to go ahead and put this on the NES. And we said, well, you can't. I mean, really, it's there's not enough pixels. I mean, my whole goal with Shadowgate was to make it the most immersive fantasy game ever. And it's pretty hard to do, on a black and white Mac with a, pixel grid of 160 by 100 or whatever. But anyway, they wanted to put it on the NES, and we're just kind of like, they can't do that. It's gonna be a pain. How are you gonna move the cursor and all this other stuff? And so
Yeah.
they said we want to try, and so we said fine. And so they came back to us with the game that you've seen on the NES, and it was pretty amazing, right? And they were able to fit a ton of it. I mean, their sprite work was great. They fit a ton of it on a cartridge. I think only maybe one room, two rooms maybe were missing from the Mac, and the game did really well because it was so different. It was
Yeah.
this adventure game, this first person adventure game where everything else was side scrolling Mario type things and stuff, which are great,
Right.
obviously. But it did really well. And so, that ended up, they ended up doing Deja when Uninvited. And, Karl and I were just, I mean, our job was to just play through it, look at the localization that they had done from English to Japanese and then back to English and for some reason Swedish. But and so that was kind of the start. So I met Terry in youth ministry. I kind of got a lucky break there, being able to go ahead and make some games and get started and stuff. And I think we did Shadowgate for free. I mean, at that point, I think later they, obviously we got a job out of it. So that was but
well,
that's the way we started.
I was completely oblivious as a kid to all of these other versions, the Mac version and whatnot.
It's been ported like 15 times. I mean, it runs on the Pocket PC, right? So,
but
I remember like Doom, where they get Doom and they've got Doom running on a pregnancy test. I mean, it could be probably that.
Yeah.
You seen those things? Crazy.
It is crazy. It's very crazy. I've even seen it running on, speaking of Macs, when they had the touch bar at the top of their laptops, they got Doom running on that touch bar screen. Like, awesome. Makes no sense at all. But
it's awesome. Kudos to you, John Karlak and John Romero.
A couple of things about Shadowgate that I remember was, you didn't know which mirror to break. You didn't know which gem to put in the socket. Like, there weren't a lot of clues, but I always just assumed, like, I never really thought about it back then, and I just assumed that was a limitation of the system.
No.
But the games were
bad game design.
Well, games were so short. Games were so short back then.
Yeah, those took a long time to through. Yeah,
they were really hard, and a lot of it was just trial and error. And like, to me, that was I just thought it was part of the game design. But what made it different was it was the first game I ever remember having a save state.
Right.
I don't remember there being games didn't have those on the NES, and this had a way to save your file.
Yeah.
So
there were some things I'm sorry, go ahead.
It was just kind of fun to have you on because I named my show The Save State, and then that's the first game I remember having one.
I mean, there's some things about Shadowgate that I think the one thing, obviously there's a lot of deaths. So because we wanted
death music, by the way, is
exactly.
some of the best.
Right,
some of the best video game music ever made is that death music.
It's actually an interesting thing because I mean, people have asked me about the deaths and stuff, and we tried to make them, part funny, part kind of, over the top and stuff. And part of it was that we wanted to let the player do everything they could. If they want to try to light themselves on fire, we're going to let them. If they're going to jump out the window, they're going to, drink poison, whatever it is.
It's very Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, it is. Right. Yeah. Let you do the Dungeon Master lets you do what you want, right? Rather than just firing an arrow, I should be able to go ahead and pull a piece of cloth off my body and light it on fire and fire it, right? So there was a lot of that. But I think the thing that always surprised myself and Karl when we talk about it, still to this day, we're best friends. He, cool. People will point out, people will point out that it scared him, that it was some sort of frightening game. And maybe it was because the Grim Reaper would pop up, right? So often. And we were just kind of like, really? I mean, Uninvited was the scary game. I don't, I just looked at this as whatever. So, and especially when we're talking about the size of the screen. And we're not talking about Shadowgate VR. I mean, we're talking like, dozens of pixels. So hundreds or whatever. But, it was, or the colors, the color palette was so, small and everything. But I think that was always the thing that really surprised us.
Like you said, it's not really a scary game. And I play it now and it's like, no, it's not a scary game. But I think it was just the fact that
probably
you didn't know what was going to happen. So there was just that anxiety of, when I do this thing, is it going to kill me or not?
Right. There is that. And of course, the thing about adventure games, which are pretty much the same as any game, there's that level of frustration versus success, right? And so, I think that's what we've really learned more and more about when, at Zojoy, we've been making games is, where's that sweet spot where you go, oh, can't get past this thing. And then finally you realize, oh, I need the blank out of the I need the candlestick out of the parlor or whatever to go ahead and solve it. And then have that have that moment of success that you can put it down and say, all right, I got to the next room. And even as we go into VR and, Shadowgate VR, it's an interesting, how we looked at it really wasn't that much different. I mean, we said, every room, there's going to be an overarching goal, in the game, or small or mini goals, but then every room is going to have one goal, which is to get out of it. And so just balancing the whole thing between, that, frustration and success is always important.
Well, let's talk about Shadowgate VR. I mean, on my channel, I do a lot of retro stuff and I do a lot of VR stuff and I do some stuff in between, but those are like bookends on the gaming industry.
Right
now.
I combined them. Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah, and you're bridging the gap here because you've experienced all of this. Shadowgate VR. When I first saw it on, I haven't beat it yet, but I am in the middle of playing it and enjoying it.
Good.
When I first saw it on the Quest store, I was like, "No way, no way! Is that the same Shadowgate?" And bought it, and yeah, it is. And I love that you put little reference like the Raven puts references like Lackmere and King Otto's Fair and stuff that. Yeah, there's little references to the original and stuff in there, which I think is so cool. So tell us about your journey from where you started. Tell us about this into VR. How did you get into VR?
Well, it's actually I owe it all to a friend of mine, Rich Douglas, who does all our music. We had just finished. I'd worked like 4 or 5 years with my lead programmer, Thane Bowman, and my lead artist, Adam Meixner. And we had worked 4 or 5 years on this game called Argonus and the Gods of Stone. And it's one of my favorite games. But it launched on Steam along with 30 other titles, and it never really got noticed. And that was just discouraging. And so after working on so many games and working so long on this game, which is kind of my love letter to the old Ray Harryhausen movies of the 70s and stuff. And so I ended up, I was pretty much done. I was pretty burned out. And Rich said, you have to pick up that Oculus Quest. And I had Steam's headset, right, which was tethered, and you had these base stations.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'd had that. And I mean, I thought VR was cool, but in general, but he said, you have to pick up the Oculus Quest. And I said, all right. And I picked it up and I was just blown away. I mean, just the fact that, there was untethered for this particular headset. And so I talked to the guys, and we had done some 3D, trying out 3D, with Steam's headset and everything. And we thought it was cool and it was interesting, but Rich was like, you got to put Shadowgate on this. You have to put Shadowgate on this. And so we started prototyping, and it was just a lot of fun. And for me, it was, I think the reason I was willing to do it was because I go back to what I originally wanted to do with Shadowgate, which was make it the most immersive first-person adventure game, right? Which is very difficult to do on the NES or on the Mac. And even redoing it in 2016 with Chris Cole's art and the full screen on your PC or Mac or whatever. I mean, it still is very difficult to get that immersion. And so here, Adam and Thane had just programmed a couple rooms where all I was doing was walking around with a wand, with a fireball and killing monsters and stuff. And I said, this is it. This is the conclusion of the road. I can die a happy man, bring Shadowgate into an immersion. And so we prototyped it for like 8 months because the point and click didn't work. It just wasn't fun. And I know that there are some games out there, and what we're doing with Shadowgate VR 2, The Source of Magic, that will come out next year. That one has more, building things and making potions and doing stuff like that. But and there's some great games like Red Matter that will be a lot more, pull this and turn this and make this and stuff. But we really found that was really fun is that we're in a dungeon, and there are monsters there, and there are spells that I'm going to learn. There's going to be definitely adventure. There's going to be elements of finding things and making things and stuff. But for the most part, it was going to be that immersive dungeon experience. And so we worked on it, this prototype, for 9 months and sent it to Meta, and then didn't hear anything. But eventually they got back to us, and they were excited about it. And so we put it out there, and it, it did well. And just getting it out there. And then, it went out on a few Chinese headsets, and put it out on the Steam headset. And so it was, it's pretty fun. It's pretty amazing to do that. And then most recently, working with Impact and Flat VR2, bring it to the PlayStation VR2 has certainly been a challenge, but also very cool. Adding some other features, adding more adding eye tracking, which is a big deal now in our game, to be able to see hidden things, crouching, and better, a little bit making it easier. Or I'm sorry, making the player faster and stuff. So so that's kind of how it started, I guess. And so
So with the PSVR 2 version, you've been able to make some like quality of life improvements, you would say?
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
cool. That's cool.
And also, the interesting thing, and I've played a lot of VR games, and I've played some retro games that have come to VR. And I think the reason Shadowgate works so well in Shadowgate VR, the Mines of Mythrok, is because you only have so many draw calls. You can only have so much memory, especially on an untethered headset. But a lot of the stuff still applies here to the PlayStation. When you're in the middle of room 2 and it's a hallway and you're getting closer to being able to finish that room, we're preloading the room that's up, right? The next room 3. And so as soon as you go through that door into room 3 and the door shuts behind you, we destroy room 2. And then we're going to eventually start to load room 4. And so the reason it's so immersive and the reason the graphics are so awesome that Adam has done is that we're using the entire processor to go ahead and render that room in some of the next room as we go. And so that's where we get so many great texture maps, and that our lighting is so dynamic and stuff. Because when you go, if you were playing, again, a retro game from the 80s or 90s, and it's in an open world or something, it's very difficult. I don't know if you tried it, but it's very difficult to get that level of detail because you're using all your draw calls. You're using everything for just a large area. So I think that's why Shadowgate works so well.
So in the Mines of Mythrok, and I want to ask you about, because you mentioned the sequel. I want to ask you about that in a minute because the subtitle is book 1 of the Shadowgate Saga or something like that. And I was like, is there going to be a book 2? Because that's pretty exciting. But let's talk about Odin.
Yeah,
because you've got this companion in this game that travels with you and kind of can give you hints, and which I've found to be very valuable at times. So how'd that come about?
So Adam and I spent a lot of time, and Thane, talking about when we were putting it together, and we were talking about things that we wanted to do that was beyond what the player sees. So we started talking about a companion, and I don't remember what it was first, a hummingbird or something. But we came up with Odin, which is this one-eyed raven. We thought, well, he has one eye. It's one glowing red eye. Mm-hmm. And we thought it would be really cool if Odin could see things that you couldn't see, part of the adventure, part of the thing. So we came up with this perch program idea where there's perches all over. And some of them they're just obelisks. But then other places that he'll just land. And you could call him to any of these. And sometimes he would go there on his own. And you could go into Odin's all-seeing eye, which we call Odin vision. So you press one of the buttons, you go into his eye, and you can look around, and everything goes red. But you can see things that you don't see without him. There might be runes, there might be triggers, there might be invisible chests, treasure chests. And so
there's literally some places you can't get past unless you use
without him. Yes. And so we love this idea because it's almost like you're in some sort of multiplayer thing. Obviously you're not single player game, but you've got this companion. And so as when we implemented, we said from a gameplay standpoint, this is really fun. Mm-hmm. But the more we played it, we were just like, there's this line, I don't know, I just remember it from This Is Spinal Tap. Billy Crystal's on there and he's going, come on, funny as money. And so it always, we were always talking about that. And we're just thinking, and we've seen this in the Marvel movies, right? Where, they add a lot of humor. And we just thought, well, let's just add a lot of humor with Odin. So Odin will, we have things called Odin quips. And Odin will say stuff as you walk into a room, which is usually like, oh, fantastic, just another web, filled cavern that goes into nothing. What could possibly go wrong? I mean, things like that, right? And so we thought that was really fun. And then as you're playing, we just amped up that sarcasm. So as you're
Yeah.
playing, he's like, well, I'm not getting any older. Or he'd be saying, just crazy stuff. And of course, the more he said, the more we went, well, maybe we should put an option in the settings so you can turn off Odin
Turn
if
off
you
the
don't want it.
sarcasm.
Sarcasm, bring the sarcasm. So it's literally the Odin sarcasm meter. And so that was the byproduct, right? The byproduct of having this great character in the game. And then we started bringing him more into the story. And we just said, how is, Lakmir, which is the wizard from the original game, sends Odin out to find somebody that can head into Shadowgate. But first having to go through the Mines of Mythrok. And then we started saying, what's his story? And how does that tie into the overarching plot? And is he everything we think he is, or is he different, or is he, something more or less, and so it ended up being everybody's favorite thing, right? Everybody loves Odin, and you can pet Odin if you want. Odin is a ghost.
He doesn't like it.
Doesn't like it most of the time. Sometimes he'll be like, "It makes you feel any better. Keep petting away." And then you could fire a fireball at him and stuff like that. And he'll just be like, "I'm going to tell Lackman on you," or whatever. And so, but yeah, he ended up being a really crucial part, and he plays a bigger role in Source of Magic. So
that's cool. So you can adjust the sarcasm and turn that off if you want to. The other thing I noticed is that you can change the spiders into silly spiders.
Right, silly spider mode.
Is that because you guys got all that feedback, like you mentioned earlier, about the original being scary? You decided to make it less scary, or is it just?
Actually, we were looking at other games that had featured giant spiders, and a lot of them had gone ahead and made some sort of silly spider mode because some players wouldn't play because, and when you have a spider the size of a Buick chasing you, there's certainly, certainly makes sense to go ahead and have something like that. So yeah, it just turns it into these pink and yellow, cute like little things and stuff. But yeah, that was very intentional and something we implemented pretty not that far into the game. I mean, we were into development, so it was pretty early in development.
Well, I thought it was a great idea because some people really have like
spider phobia,
debilitating fear of spiders. So that makes total sense to me to add that feature. Very cool.
And then we did, one of the things we did pretty early on was saying, how can we break up some of the puzzle, adventure elements and stuff. And so we added this minecart sequence, which is just a blast. There's a couple different sequences on a minecart and everything, and it really takes advantage of VR and moving through these spaces and stuff. And it's, there's a lot there. So very diverse.
Yeah, it is because you've got some combat in there too. It's
a lot of combat. Sure, we have a lot of combat. We have a lot of solving puzzles and trying to figure out where am I going to find this thing, or if I pull this lever, what is it going to open and stuff. So I mean, I would just have to say it's very Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's everything when you're playing a game and the DM is saying you've entered a room and there's a forge in the middle of the room, and above a pit is a chain that's holding a big dwarven statue, and there's these machines in the corners and stuff. What are you going to do? And then
you got to figure it out.
Yeah, and just taking advantage of the headsets is great. Using climbing and I think. In the next game, you can do some swimming and stuff. And so it's pretty cool.
Okay. Well, man, I didn't even know we were going to be able to talk about the next game when we were scheduling this meeting. But what can you tell us about book 2? Is it book 2 or? Yeah,
it's book 2, and it wraps up the saga because it's it's huge. It's almost twice the size of the first game. The first game ends getting out of the Mines of Mythrok and seeing the castle in the distance. And the second game is getting to the castle, which we call the Source of Magic, which is at the bottom of Shadowgate. And so it is, you pick up a new companion at the end of the first game, which I won't tell you what that is, but and then it comes into play here. And it's just we've been working on it for a couple of years now. The spell system and the potion system is new, and just some of the things that we're allowing you to do there, just takes Mines of Mythrok to a whole new level. So it's pretty much all I can say at this point. But Yeah, it'll be coming out next year, on the Quest, but also on the PlayStation. So we're pretty excited about it.
Nice. Are you trying to do a simultaneous release for
That would
both?
be nice.
Or
That would be nice. We didn't really have access to the PlayStation, and we really starting with the Quest was the low hanging fruit. It was the easiest way of getting out there. But yeah, we're hoping for that, but we'll have to see. We're a very small team. I mean, the number of people working on the game is less than 5. But with the help of like our new publisher, Flat VR, and they have been amazing in getting us onto the PlayStation. I mean, they've given us a lot of programming help and other things. So it certainly was not apples to apples between those two devices.
I keep finding this to be true, and it's something I didn't really realize, or I don't know, didn't think about before. But a lot of the games that I really like are made by very small teams. Do you find that there are a lot of just small dev teams out there?
There's so many, and with the fact that the tools are available, are readily available. The game engines, whichever one, like maybe you're using Unity or whatever, but just the art programs, the art packages, audio. It's just a single person can go ahead and create a game. It's pretty remarkable. So at the same time, it's difficult to make. If you're not a AAA studio, it's difficult to make a lot of money because there's so many games, right? Especially when you've got Steam, which is an open ecosystem. So if you have $100 to go ahead and to get your game on Steam, you can sell it, and I think it's it's fantastic. But it's tough to be an indie developer because like Oculus and Meta is going to an open source system as well, so you don't have to get approved any longer. So, but more games for the average consumer average player to go ahead and choose from, which is good for players.
Yeah,
maybe not as good for developers, but I mean, most of the stuff that when an indie developers, it's a passion. I mean, really it is. I mean, I have a full-time job, and Zojoy and the games that we make is a passion. So either you love making games, or you do it for the love of game, because if you're not, that's tough.
Yeah, well, I get that. I mean, I have a full-time job as well, and this whole YouTube thing I just do it because I really enjoy it, and I want to talk to people about gaming. And so yeah, I get it, at least to a degree. I do not know how to make a game. I wish I did. Well, I know that, hey, we got full-time jobs that we both got to get to. So I know you gotta wrap it up. But do you have any last final words of wisdom or advice for our audience today that you might want to share?
I guess, I'm hoping that folks are going to be excited about Shadowgate VR, the Mines of Mythrok on the Sony PlayStation 2, VR2. It really is quite amazing, and it comes out later this month. I think the launch date is the 24th of November, and wish list it if you can. Help support small developers, and I appreciate Bo having me on.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, Dave.
All right.
Glad you could join me today.
Thanks,
go check out Shadowgate VR, whether you're on Steam or Quest or PlayStation VR 2. Great game, lots of cool puzzles to solve, and Odin is hilarious, and just an all-around fun game. Thank you guys for joining us today, and stay kind and encouraging out there, and we'll catch you on the flippity flip. See ya.
Thanks.